and welcome everybody. While we give everyone time to arrive, I'm going to begin with a few access announcements. For those of you who want to access the captioning, you can click the CC button in the bottom of your navigation bar. We will be spotlighting our interpreter, Kaylee, during tonight's conversation. We're going to have the chat turned off, but if you have any questions about accessibility, please ask them through the Q&A located on the bottom of the navigation bar. Thanks. And welcome everybody to tonight's online conversation, Crip Camp, Why the Disability Revolution is Good for Everyone, hosted by Real Artways. My name is Megan Bent, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator at Real Artways, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussion, and I'm a proud member of the disability community. I'm going to provide an audio description of myself. I have pale light skin, long reddish brown hair, and I'm wearing a black tank top. I'm sitting in my apartment, and behind me there is some artwork on the walls, plants in the windows, and twinkle lights hanging from the ceiling. To start, I'm going to say a few thank yous. Thank you very much to the Real team for helping plan this event, especially Will K. Wilkins, our Executive Director, Ian Ali Seals, our Cinema Coordinator, and Neil Daigle Oriens, our Visual Arts Manager. A huge thank you to Nicole Newnham, Jim Lebrecht, and Sarah Boulder for having the vision and dedication to create the documentary Crip Camp. And thank you so much to our panelists. I feel like it's a gift to have you here with us tonight to share your insights and your experience. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we will begin the discussion. Please feel free to share your questions with us through the Q&A during the event. Our first introduction is Judith Judy Heumann, a woman with many accolades that we're pleased to have here tonight. She is a lifelong advocate for the rights of disabled people and is featured in Crip Camp, a Disability Revolution. Judy was a founding member of the Berkeley Center for Independent Living, which was the first grassroots center in the United States, and helped to launch the independent living movement both nationally and globally. President Obama appointed her as the first special advisor for the international disability rights at the US Department of State, where she served from 2010 to 2017. She was recently featured on the Trevor Noah show, and her memoir, Being Human, an Unrepentant Memoir of a Disability Rights Activist, was recently published by Beacon Press. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
Next, I'll introduce Lionel Je'Woodyard, who worked at Camp Chenette as a teen counselor, adult camp director, field trip coordinator, swimming instructor, and many other get the job done capacities. In 1972, after graduating from college, Lionel moved to New York City from his hometown of Mobile, Alabama. And he has worked for the Camp Chenette Foundation, United Cerebral Palsy, and has continuously been involved in disability advocacy for many years. The Camp Chenette experience left a lifelong positive impression on Lionel, and he appeared in Crip Camp, the Disability Revolution. Welcome, Lionel. Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
And last but not least, introduce Shelley Coy, who got the ball rolling for this whole event. He is a counselor and later co-director of Camp Chenette. Both of Coy's parents attended Camp Chenette and encouraged their children to become involved. Shelley taught in the New York City public school system for 32 years, and he is currently the educator and administrative director of the Hebrew Tabernacle Congregation in Washington Heights, New York City. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you. So I'd like to start real quickly by thanking Judy for all of her work in championing human rights, disability rights, people rights for all these years. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Shelley.
All right, so our first question, I feel like we need to go back to camp. So what I would like to ask is, what brought each of you to Camp Chenette, and how did the experience change you?
I think Lionel should go first.
All right, Lionel, share with us.
I live grew up in Mobile, Alabama. In my early life, I had never been outside the border states of Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia. I'd never been beyond my territory. I responded when Dad would say summer camp, New York. I had experience working at a Boy Scout camp. I made Eagle Scout when I was 15, and it worked at a Boy Scout camp. I was very, very familiar with camp. But the sales pitch was New York. In my mind is that we were going to New York. In the interview, they said camp for handicapped kids or kids with disabilities. I don't remember that. All I remember is that I was getting a job in New York at a camp. And I'm so happy that I answered that and that I was hired.
Thanks, Lionel. Just to let you know, your audio is coming in and out just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Shelley, would you like to share with us what brought you to Camp Chenette?
Sure. So both my parents had polio. My father walked with two braces and crutches. My mother had a one-leg brace. They were both very friendly, quoting Jim's father's advice to him. Both of my parents were very outgoing. My father was a warm person. My mother was smart, confident, kind, and assertive. She was very comfortable giving directions as to how she wanted things done. This reminds me of another panelist who is right here sitting with us. So she was a secretary to Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. My brother and I were aware of their disabilities, but as Neil said in reference to his son David, they were our parents. They just did things differently, but they got things done. We never felt we were lacking in anything, especially there was a lot of love. My father would take us to the park and use one crutch to hit a rubber ball towards us while balancing with the other one. My mother was the president of the Parents Association at our schools, and she became the entertainment committee chairperson at the Federation of the Handicapped, where she ran monthly socials where she would arrange transportation to bring in people from all over the city, had live bands, and she had catered events. And she's very proud of the fact that she got people out of the house.
Oops, Shelley, you just got muted real quickly. Perfect.
Okay, here I am again.
Yep.
So she would bring in people from all over the city once a month, and I would go to those socials, and I would help people out. I would take people to the bathroom. I would help to feed people. So when I went into college during my first year, my parents, specifically my mother, suggested I try working at Camp Chenette. So I did. And it was a natural fit for me because I had been around people with disabilities and had learned that there are people there, regardless of how they looked. As Jim said in the movie, at the Federation of the Handicapped, everybody had something happening with their bodies. Mm-hmm. So that was not an issue for me. And I was obviously very focused in on giving people the ability to focus on their abilities rather than their disability. So that's how I came to Camp Chenette. I worked for 10 years. I did a lot of jobs and had a great time.
Thanks. Judy, what brought you to Camp Chenette?
I was a teenager. I had gone to Camp Oakers for a couple of years, which was a Federation camp. And they only had sessions for 3 weeks. And Chenette had sessions for 4 weeks, and you could stay for 8 weeks.
Oh,
nice.
nice.
And as I recall, that was really the reason why I went to Chenette. And I had friends who were going to Chenette, but I had friends who had gone to Oakhurst also. So that's why I went. I wanted to be able to be at camp for longer periods of time. And Chenette was the camp that offered it. As far as I remember, that was it. And it was a camp for disabled kids, and it had a good reputation, you know, from other parents. So that was it.
How did it change you being at the camp?
I think we should go back in the same order we started.
All right, Lionel. How did the experience of Camp Chenette change you?
Well, let me share this with you. Mm-hmm. Can you hear me first?
Yes, I can hear you.
When I came up to Chenette, it was the first time I'd been out of my cultural, social community.
Mm-hmm.
I lived and grew up and existed in a totally segregated environment. So coming to Chenette, I was birthed at Chenette, so to speak. I became a part of the community of the world. Now, people at the camp were disabled, but that didn't really register with me. See, I didn't know anyone that had a disability. And that's something that we're going to talk on later. Because if there are 40 plus million people with disabilities, you have to believe that there's somewhere that's like 40 plus million African Americans. You see them everywhere, but you don't see people with disabilities. Back then, they were hid away. So whenever the camp didn't change me, it enhanced my life.
Yeah.
And it gave me an opportunity to become a part of a bigger community.
Thank you. It's just wonderful to hear that reflection. Shelley, how did being at Camp Chenette change you?
Well, I think being at Camp Chenette made me realize the power that I had to have a really positive impact on people's lives, because I think everybody at Chenette was in the business of impacting each other's lives, campers and staff people, learning from each other, experiencing things with each other, because we were really, a lot of us were pretty much contemporaries in terms of age. And I realized that a lot of things that were happening at Chenette were happening because of my efforts. And that I thought was a really powerful thing, a really fulfilling thing for me.
Absolutely. Judy, what about you? How did being at Camp Chenette change you?
I mean, I think Camp Chenette allowed me to continue to mature and to be able to experience life as other teenagers were. But I also think it enabled us, me and many of the other people there, to have opportunities, again, like other teenagers were having, regarding where were we in our lives, what did we want to be doing in our futures, talking about dating and various things like that, where we didn't really have the same opportunities when we were back in our communities, because we were typically the only disabled person, like in our family, in our neighborhoods. And even at school, like in high school, I was not in my neighborhood. So the ability to really socialize in high school and participate in the after school activities and things didn't really happen. So I think both at Oakhurst when I was younger and then at Chenette for the years I was there, it was really enabling me to also gain my voice and to really feel equal with everyone, because we had similar experiences. And I want to say one thing, that, you know, one thing about Chenette later on, not when I was younger, but like when I was at camp at the job that I had, the word disabled is a very important one. And we use it in a positive way. So I personally don't use the word able. I say non-disabled. And we use the word ableist in a pejorative way. And for me, it's my disability limits me in doing certain things. I can't walk. I have limited use of my arms. But I don't think I'm less quote unquote able than someone else. And the reason I don't use the word able versus disabled is because, in my view, that's kind of ableist unintentionally, but it's giving power over to someone who doesn't apparently have a disability or doesn't see themselves as necessarily having one. And I'm kind of a stickler on the language thing. So at Chenette, the last year that I was there, that was definitely like an issue that was going on with some of us, because we had started this group called Disabled in Action.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was kind of a funny little story, because when it started, it was called Handicapped in Action. And then we set up the board, and like within 1 week, we changed the name, totally legally. We had a vote of the board. We put a new name forward, called it Disabled in Action. That's what it's still called.
DIA.
Yep.
Sorry?
Excellent.
DIA, exactly.
Yes. I wanted to go back to something that you brought up, Lionel, where you said that, you know, you feel like often disabled people are not seen enough. And in the beginning of the movie, Jim says, I wanted to be part of the world, but I didn't see anyone like me in it. So
Cool.
I just wanted to bring up the question, like, you know, let's talk about representation and like, why is it so important that we have disabled people, not just like more out in the world, but like in leadership roles, everything like that, just to bring that up.
Something that I didn't know until I saw the movie
Mm-hmm.
was the fact that Judy and Jim and other individuals with less able were
No, with disabilities.
less
With disabilities.
with disabilities.
Thank you.
With disabilities
Thank you.
were not allowed to go to school. I couldn't fathom that. But then after reflecting on it, I realized that I did not know anyone my age less able
No, with a disability.
with a disability.
Thank you.
All right. Now imagine that. And the audience should think about this.
Mm-hmm.
In your lifetime, did you know anyone at your school that might have been in a wheelchair?
Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember anyone. Now, there was a girl at my school that had braces. She was a year ahead of me. And I don't think she would mind me saying her name, Linda Davis. She did everything everybody else did, but you have to believe that there were people after going to Chenette that were in wheelchairs that were locked away somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and all of the people that came to Chenette that had been locked away found a freedom at Chenette, like the freedom I found when I left Alabama. Because at Chenette, no matter what you brought to the table, you were part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
When I got to Chenette, I brought this brown skin that was not accepted in Alabama, but at Chenette, I was a part of the family.
You're
Okay?
a cute part of the family.
I'm definitely.
You are a cute part of the family.
Thank you very much, Judy. Judith.
Shelley, Judy, would you like to share thoughts on representation and its importance?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. I think Judy might have a little bit more to say about it. So to me, representation at the camp, for instance, was very important because there were campers, for instance, who saw my parents and they saw that they had kids, and several campers said to me that they saw my parents as role models, that they were hoping that they too could have a family, you know, when they got older. And other things like it was really important for campers to see disabled staff people.
Yeah.
And that was something that was started at camp a long time ago. For instance, in 1968, I just happened to find a piece of paper, there was a work camp program. And they said essentially it clearly showed these people participating in the work camp, these young people, that their contributions are important and that there is a place for them in society. So when younger disabled campers would see staff people, would see Judy, would see Steve Hoffman,
Mm-hmm.
See Carolyn Bethka, see Denise Scherer, in leadership roles, and you know, people working like Jim and other people who worked in various capacities in the camp. This was like an inspiration to me, it would seem, because it showed that there is a place for them, you know, and that gave them something to aspire to. And you know, when we had the construction summer, Al Winters had my mother be the head of the kitchen. So that to me was a pretty cool thing because, you know, she was given a position of a lot of responsibility. She was giving people to help her, but he was showing his faith in disabled people to do the job.
Absolutely.
So I think it's very interesting. When I went to Chenette as a camper, it was in the 60s before this program. And so there were no disabled individuals who were employed. Now, there may have been people with hidden disabilities that we didn't know about, but there were no visibly disabled people that I ever remember working at Chenette when I was a high school student, for example. And, you know, one of the other things was that the program that Shelley's talking about, I think, was obviously an important program because it was also showing the normal habit of what happened at a camp is when you were 14, 15 years old, you became a counselor in training.
Mm-hmm.
But disabled kids at that time didn't become a counselor in training. So, you know, one of the things that some of us would talk about is we were not allowed to date the staff and the staff were not allowed to date us. But kids the same age who were working in the camp as a, you know, in the kitchen or whatever, they could date each other. And so, you know, they really, I think as the camp matured and as things were changing, including, you know, people like Shelley who were older and now seeing things that were going on, the camp itself began to change. But in the beginning, the camp was run by non-disabled people. So I'd like to ask you, Megan, so you said you had a disability.
I do.
And so why is identification important for you?
Well, I would say,
And
I
what
won't
is
go
disability?
too long, but when I first was diagnosed, I have a couple of chronic illnesses. My only experiences were of being rejected and shame, and that was deeply internalized. And it wasn't until I started doing disability studies and learning about people like you, Simi Linton, Alice Wong, that I found a community and I found pride, I found an identity, and that has meant the world to me. And so I just feel like that representation, I wish I had found it sooner. And a lot of us doing Crip Camp virtual are like reflecting on that and saying, how can we make sure that the youth of today find this sooner? Yeah.
And I would also say that it, you know, I think we need in our movement not just to be talking about youth. And the reason I say that is because as people get older, they are more likely to acquire disabilities.
Yes.
And I think for people as they're getting older, they, you know, exactly what you were saying, Megan. So they've lived their lives 30, 40, 50 years as a non-disabled person, having learned about what people think about us, and maybe also played a role in injuring us intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah.
And then they're us. And so I think, you know, we really need to be looking at ways of reaching out to people when they are acquiring their disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
is the way I would like to phrase it, regardless of their age.
I like that a lot. Absolutely. That's a wonderful point.
And that way they can sort of be welcomed into the community and they can find a place in it and not find shame in it. And I mean, the woman in the movie, Holly, I believe her name was, when
Mhm.
she,
Yes.
when she became disabled, she saw it from the other side of the coin. And I remember what she said about the 504 being passed, it gave her validity, or it gave her worth, and she really appreciated that. But I think, as Judy's saying, it would really be good to sort of provide a gentle transition into that phase and know that you're not alone.
Well, may I say this, if you can hear me?
Yes.
I think that Larry Allison said something in the movie, is that the problem wasn't with people that would with disabilities. The problem was people without disabilities. I made a comment in the movie
Mm-hmm.
that was left on the editor's floor. I made a comment about the present president of the United States, 45, because, okay, 45 during the election of last year, 3 years ago, made a mockery
Mm-hmm.
out of an individual with cerebral palsy. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I recognized that when I saw it, because I knew what he was doing. And I learned that the man was in fact had cerebral palsy. He was making a mockery out of that. So what I'm saying is that society has to change. Society has to see a person with a disability as opposed to a able person. You got to see the person first.
Mm-hmm.
All
And
right?
that's like with anybody, right? When you
Yeah.
talk about race or religion,
Yes.
sexual orientation, you want people to see people. The reality is we're not there yet. People have most people have some biases and prejudices. And I think it's really,
Mhm.
I mean, I like your point, Lionel, and I think we really, one of the things about Chenette, exactly as you said, and other camps, is that, diversity was respected,
Definitely. Definitely.
across the board. And I think it was and is very important to see that in communities like were being developed in Chenette, that there really was a learning, I think, for all people, because, Lionel came from the South, so he was a Black man coming to the North, but he was also a Southerner Black man who hadn't met disabled people. And just like many of the other counselors, they were not like Shelley. They were people who wanted to be a camp counselor. I mean, Shelley, why did some of the people want to be counselors? Because you were involved in selecting them. And what made someone, in your view, able to be a good counselor?
So some of the people who wanted to be counselors were doing it. You hear the thunder in the background here in New York City. Some of the people who wanted to be counselors wanted to do it because they were involved in physical therapy or speech therapy or those kinds of fields in college. When we would interview people, we'd actually try to discourage them, because we would tell them how difficult the job could be. It involved a lot of personal care, and that was part of the job, and it had to be done in such a way as to make people comfortable with the fact that you were giving them personal care. So we were looking for people who were compassionate. We were looking for people who wanted to help other people achieve their best. And that was really the criteria that we used. And we were really open to anybody who wanted to do that. So
I mean, I want to talk about this point, a couple of things. One is what Shelley was able to say about growing up. So the very fact that his parents had disabilities and that his parents didn't take him and his brother away from the disability community, but rather brought them in, it was a normal part of life. One thing for me, and I think many others at Chenette and Oakhurst, was we had relied, those of us who had a disability where we couldn't do everything by ourselves. So I needed help getting my braces on and off, getting dressed and undressed, bathing, getting my bathing suit on and off, going to the bathroom. I needed all that help. And when I was growing up, that was basically done by my mother and father. So going to camp was really the first time when I was 9, and then when I was 12 at Chenette, where I also had the ability to be directing people. Where, if your mother was going to do something, or your father, and you didn't like it that way, it was really kind of difficult to say anything. But if it was someone like a counselor who did know, as Shelley was saying, that part of their responsibility was to provide assistance, but part of their responsibility was to be sensitive to the person they were working with.
Really?
And so that ability, I think, too, for me, that was very important, to really be able to, and also with other campers who could help, but it was very important to be able to finally be able to figure out, what did I want to wear? And oh no, I tried this on, I didn't really want to wear this, I want to try something else on. And many, many different things like that, that really, I think, were very important experiences in our life, to learn that we didn't have to say yes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I want to jump in on that for a second, because in terms of the philosophy of the camp, a really important point was giving people choices and letting them know they had the power to decide. And it went into things like, we had a workshop program. Do you want to be on the newspaper workshop? Do you want to be in the drama workshop? Do you want to be in the human sexuality workshop? And people had choices, just like in Judy's famous lasagna scene,
Yeah.
trying to get people to figure out what they wanted to eat. Well, that was a really important part of the camp. Do you want to go to the Saratoga racetrack? Do you want to go to the Maverick concerts? Do you want to go to wherever, the Baseball Hall of Fame. People were given choices all the time and throughout, and people were expected to make choices and to talk about their choices and to have the ability to express their desires and the things that they wanted to do. And that was a really important thing about the camp program, that we tried to make it different from other places.
My presumption is that was similar to what went on at regular camps. So what was possibly atypical in a camp for disabled kids was the fact that it was a camp for kids. And the kids maybe needed assistance in ways that non-disabled kids didn't, but the obvious focus on choice and really emphasizing that, I think, was very important. And yeah, so I think, I don't know that when I was there, I felt that it was really something that the camp was offering, but it certainly was something that I felt I could do. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe, Shelley, when did you start working at the camp? You're on mute, Shelley. You're muted.
And now I'm not. So my guardian of memories, Denise Scherer, tells me I started in '67.
Yeah, and
because I always get confused. She keeps me straight as far as those important dates go. So I think I started after the time that you stopped being a camper, I think. But then you came back.
You know, I worked in my freshman and sophomore years of college. I had a regular job.
Oh yeah, what'd you do?
I worked as a senior center, and I was doing, you know, like social work at
cool.
the William Reed Day Center for Senior Citizens.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah.
I have a question from the audience I'd love to bring in.
Okay.
So, and it definitely hits on everything that you have been speaking to, the inclusion and diversity at Camp Chenette, the leadership that was modeled, and the ways that that was brought into the activism that happened later on, especially thinking about the 504 sit-ins. With that in mind, what do you all think that the disability community has to teach the non-disabled world, especially during this moment right now, as we're living through a pandemic and as we're having more and more activism occurring?
So my short answer is that everybody is valuable. Everybody has importance. Everybody's thoughts are important. And this again goes to Judy's practice of making sure there was a sign language interpreter at every meeting at the 504 demonstrations. But just the short answer is that everybody has value and worth and needs to be heard.
Absolutely. Lionel, would you like to share?
I think that in these times, all of us have a voice, and our voices should be heard, and we should look at each other. Diversity is a phenomenal and wonderful thing because the world is diverse, but our diversity has to be accepted on an equal basis.
Mm-hmm.
That no person on this earth is more valuable than another person. I accept my friend Sheldon and I are very, very close. I love Sheldon as a brother, and I appreciate his diversity. He accepts me as his brother. We bring what we bring to the table. An individual with a disability.
Oh, we lost your audio a little bit.
A person with a disability should be accepted the same way. I was thinking the other day with the upcoming election, and I'd like to ask a question to Judy. Judy, how old were you when you first voted?
18.
And you were 18? Were other members of the community, the disabled community, involved in the process of voting and having their voices heard over the years, or is this something new?
Oh, I would say it's not new, but it's growing. So what is very important is you can see over the decades that the vote and the voices of disabled people voting is something that the community has been focusing much more on. And, you know, when I voted, I think I was 18. I think Shelley, you can vote in New York at 18, right? Yes, I was definitely 18, but I wasn't really involved. I mean, I was 18. So, you know, I wasn't really involved with disability rights organizations at that point because we were just really beginning to form them. But I would say, you know, pretty early on, like with Disabled in Action and Forward, definitely looking at ways to influence candidates, come together for candidate nights, really getting more engaged in the kinds of questions and accountability. I mean, if you look at the 504 demonstrations, it was because we had, many of us had supported Jimmy Carter to be president. And he had made a commitment that he wasn't fulfilling as quickly as we wanted. And that's what that was about. And I think also we felt comfortable in many ways of being able to protest against the Democrats because we didn't feel that there would be adversity in doing what we did. I think, you know, we felt that what we were doing was really parallel to what other movements had done. And I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to get off. So I really want to thank everybody. I'm sorry I've got to do another Crip Camp event or I wouldn't leave. But thank you, Megan, so much. Lionel, it was great to see you, and Shelley, and I'll be with you again Saturday night, I think, right? Oh, no, not Saturday. Skip it. Sorry, it's another event.
Sunday.
Sorry, Sunday. What time is it Sunday?
I think it's 5 o'clock New York time. I think that's the 2-hour Crip Camp
Okay.
30th anniversary of ADA.
Yeah.
I think it's 3 o'clock New York time. I'm sorry, 5 o'clock. 5 to 7 New York. So it's 2. But that's you're in New York time too, Judy. So 5.
Okay, everybody.
Thank you.
Listening
so
to Megan, Shelley, and Lionel, they're great. Thanks, Megan, for doing this.
Thank you.
Take care, Judith.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So I wanted
Judith.
to ask, did you have something you wanted to say, Lionel?
Yeah, Judith is so special. You know, all of us, a lot of us have kept in touch with each other over these past, for me, 50 years. The camp closed in 1969 because of a fire. It reopened in 1970. This year is the 50th anniversary of the opening of Chenette.
Wow.
The action, the demonstrations that were in New York in the 70s, a lot of us were involved with them, but we were not involved with being in the street with them because we weren't supposed to be in the street. It was their movement. That's one thing about the DIA movement. It was their movement. We could work parallel to them, but they were responsible for their movement. Then I left New York and pretty much lost touch with what was going on until I saw the movie. I had no idea that
Oh, we lost your audio a tiny bit.
the Miss Revolutionary Power to the People, Judy Heumann. She was tough. And I was so proud to see that.
You didn't know about like the 504 and all that stuff that had happened?
I knew about 504. I didn't know about the taking over of the building.
Okay, yeah.
I had seen a little clip, but the news, it wasn't covered on Walter Cronkite back in those days. Okay, that wasn't an important story to the world. But after the film showed us all what happened and how that came about, someone told me something, and I learned this: that the Black Panthers assisted in making sure that they were fed. That was phenomenal. So Judy has always been, when she was at the camp and afterwards, right on the case, doing what she was supposed to do. And I'm very, very proud of having been at the camp and very proud to be her friend.
She's an amazing woman.
Without a doubt. Tough.
Shelley, what was it like for you when you saw the footage of the movie?
Well, when I first saw the movie, it was very exciting. I had seen all of that stuff when it was first done by People's Video Theater, and I had the DVDs. Actually, I had 8mm tape reels all the color footage in the movie came from those reels of film that were taken when David Arno and I were the directors, and we wanted to do a fundraising film. So I had seen a lot of that stuff. What was really a lot of fun was just participating in the making of the movie. Lionel was interviewed, I was interviewed, a lot of people were interviewed. Jim Lebrecht did a great job interviewing people and bringing us out in terms of having us tell our stories. And it was also connected to the reunion that we had in October of 2017. The day before that was the day that they shot all the Camp Chenette footage that's at the end of the movie, or most of it. Judy wasn't there, but Jim was there, obviously, and Denise and Lionel and Emily Hoffman. So all that footage was shot then. And then the next day we had a reunion where they unveiled the first trailer for the movie. So that was all really, really exciting. So, but as Lionel said, I was still running the camp through 1977. So I was only tangentially aware, I'm almost ashamed to say, of all the movement stuff that was going on. I was aware of everybody moving to Berkeley, and I thought that was great. So that was your alarm. So anyway, so seeing the footage was amazing, and seeing the movie at Sundance was totally amazing. And being on stage at the end of the movie when people went up was really amazing. And just being around everybody and having that sort of reunion at Sundance was really exciting. So that whole process of participating in the making of the movie, making the movie, and we got to see Jim and Sarah in their home and meet Nicole. So that was really a lot of fun, just doing all that stuff. And I would love to see more outtakes of stuff that was left out. I think Megan said you publicized some of the outtakes before in yesterday's newsletter from Real Artways.
Yep.
The stuff in those outtakes, just Jim getting his car and Denise talking about being on the second floor and nobody ever thought of moving. To me, it was really, really, really meaningful. And I know Lionel was with Jim when they interviewed Gene Morgan down in Mobile. And Lorenzo Bergen was also interviewed. Mike Tannenbaum was interviewed. A lot of people were interviewed, and I think I'd love to see some of that stuff.
Well, I think that being a part of the movie was a continuation of what we had been doing with each other, telling the story over and over and over again about our experience. The movie gave us an opportunity to tell the world about this phenomenal thing that had happened in our lives. Someone said in the movie that Camp Chenette was this utopia. And it was for me, definitely, and for the campers. Because some of our campers didn't come out of their homes, except maybe to go to school for those that went to school. But if you were an adult, some of our adults didn't come out of their homes from the end of camp to the beginning of camp the next year. Okay? So we knew this story of these people who found a freedom, and we knew about a place that was so special. It was pretty much like what America was supposed to be. We the people, all of us. Shelley and I, we talk about this thing about one. We were really one. Even with our diversities, and in the film it brought out something that sometimes people with cerebral palsy would look down upon compared to someone with muscular dystrophy. You know, it's just a play on things. But we have been telling this story to each other all these years. A lot of us have kept in touch. Shelley and I have been in touch. Jim and I have been in touch. I've been in touch with Judy and Mike Tannenbaum. I can name people that I worked with, and I can remember campers that were in my in BB1, and our bunk was called Boss Brothers 1. We made up that name because we were cool. We were boss, and I remember those campers who were my brothers. I remember their names and I remember their voices. It was a story that we had been telling, and finally the world found out something that we knew.
Yeah, so just following up what Lionel was saying, when Denise said it was utopia, she then said, when we were there was no outside world.
Correct.
We really did create our own society there, which was really an incredible thing. I also want to talk for a second about the fact that one of the things we also did was we took people out into the community.
Yeah.
You know, as Dennis said in the movie, you know, we're 504 and we're here. So we're Camp Chenette and we're here. And we went to town and people went, adults went to the bar in town and had drinks and stuff on a given night. We went shopping at Jamesway in Catskill, which is a department store, which is where they met the people from the People's Video Theater. As I said, we went to Saratoga Racetrack. We saw B.B. King in Saratoga. And
Fiddler on the Roof.
Fiddler on the Roof, yep. And there was a lot of other stuff in Albany. So we took people out into the community, which, as Judy alluded to earlier, was something that people at a regular camp would do. And that was another really important thing. The last couple of years, we rented 2 big red vans, and one of the board members had some ramps fabricated. So we took out the back seats of these vans, and we would roll people up the ramps into the vans, and we would go all over the place.
I took some kids.
Lionel was in, where'd you go, Lionel, in the movie?
Kids to Vermont.
Right.
On a camping trip.
Can't hear you,
And
bro.
I took kids to Vermont. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
On a camping trip. And we had a tent out to stay out, a couple of tents to stay outside. We went to stay on the farm of one of our staff members who had moved to Vermont, Erica Hunt and her husband. But check this out. The trip was co-ed. We had female campers and male campers. And we, pretty much being chauvinistic, thought that the girls would stay in the house. Those female campers, they wanted to stay outside. And they did. It was phenomenal. We rode across Lake Champlain on a ferry boat, something that our kids probably would not have experienced had it not been for Chenette. This is one thing when we came out into the community. At Chenette, there was no outside world. My picture is gone.
Oh, did you leave that?
Okay. At Chenette, there was no outside world. When we went into the city, we got those looks again. Okay? And we stood up for our kids. People didn't want us to take a kid out of a wheelchair because of course we're not wide enough.
Oh, we lost your audio.
Take a kid out of a wheelchair, take his wheelchair into the ice cream parlor, then bring him in. There were some people who were uncomfortable with us coming in because they were not comfortable with accepting someone in a wheelchair. I knew how that felt coming from a time when, because of something physical about me, people didn't want me around. But we stood up for our kids and demanded that they be served and treated equally.
Good. Absolutely. I think we have time for one last question. And so I wanted to pull another question from the Q&A. And so someone asked, was there someone in the camp who addressed the needs for patients, speaking to the quality of sort of like changing the relationship to time, the way with Judy's lasagna meeting? Was this taught at the camp, or was this something that was just intrinsically a part of the community there?
I think what you're talking about, like just listening to people and discussing things. Is that what they mean by patience?
I believe so.
Yeah, well, this was part of the camp philosophy, to listen to not make decisions for people, to involve them in the decisions that were being made about what they were going to do, was a really important main idea of the camp philosophy, that people had to have something to say about what was happening to them. Again, going back to the word choice. So that was built in, yeah, and we went to great pains to make sure that we were not making decisions for people. I mean, as the days wore on, we became really a program for teenagers and adults. And we were not. I mean, I'm not telling my mother where she's going to do, what she's going to do at night. You know, which activity she wants to do. And that was the idea that we had with everybody. we're giving people choices as far as what they wanted to do. So sometimes they didn't want to go to the night activity. They wanted to hang out outside on the porch of their bunk. That was fine. They didn't want to go swimming. That was fine. That was really built in. That was a really important part of the whole thing. And it made it sometimes administratively a little trickier to run the place because you had a lot of people doing a lot of different things, but that was still something that we built in as a really important key point.
But they were not patients, please. They were campers.
Oh, no.
Either.
Like patience as a virtue.
Oh.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah,
because they were either adult campers or teen campers, and we were either counselors or staff members.
Right, but going back to what Lionel said about one, which was really an important point, everybody really was one. And as I said before, we were all basically the same age. Denise
Yes.
and I are the same age. Lionel and Neil Jacobson and I and Stevie Hoffman, we're all basically the same age, maybe a couple of years difference. I think I'm like 4 years older than Jim LeBrecq, but we were all, we were all together. And an important point is that everybody lived together. The counselors slept in the movie. The videographer is asking, who sleeps in the top bunks? And Jim said, well, the counselors sleep there. Everybody slept in the same room. In other places, the counselors would put the campers in bed and then go to a different place where they would sleep. But this is all, everybody was together. And that really engendered a strong bond.
Absolutely. I could see how that would help to create that feeling of one, of unity. Yes.
One,
absolutely.
I think that there's a song.
Oh.
Can't hear you.
Yeah.
There was a song. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That was out after our experience. And if someone wants to understand the feeling of the camp, listen to John Lennon, Imagine.
I love it.
Yep.
Imagine.
Well, it's funny, in the when we were out there doing the interviews, Nicole said to us, to Lionel and me and Joe, who was there, my wife Tracy, that the bond that we had among the people who were at Chenette is similar to a bond of people who had gone through combat together.
Yeah.
We had a really strong connection that sort of transcended just normal friendship. It was really a bond made out of working in adverse conditions, because the bunks were not at all equipped to deal with people being transferred in and out of wheelchairs or anything like that. So this was something that we all went through together, and we bonded over it, and we're still very strongly bonded now. We have over 60 people on our email list, even today.
Oh, I have some good news.
Go ahead.
I have some good news. Today, I spoke with the historian in the village of Hunter, and she's excited about the possibility of us placing a historical marker at the camp, and is going to help us get that done. Sheldon and I have been talking about the possibility of getting a historical marker to show that this is where something magic happened.
This is where Crip Camp happened.
I love
Right.
that.
And Sheldon's son, Daniel, I hope he has agreed to design the monument that will stand forever through the test of time that we were there. We had a song, "We're Here Because We're Here."
We also had the Chenette spirit deep in our souls.
Yeah, but let me say this. The last part of that song is, "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one." That's what we had going on. And I hope that Crip Camp helps you become a part. And if you see somebody who is not a part, make them a part of your life, because we all really are one on this planet.
That's beautiful, Lionel.
That is beautiful. I think we're about out of time. It's 8 o'clock. So I think that's just a really beautiful final stopping point, that announcement about the historical marker and to reflect on John Lennon's words. So thank you for sharing both of that.
Y'all done.
I just want to say thank you again so much for being here. It's just truly been such a gift to hear from Shelley, from you, from Lionel, Judy, to hear about the experience of being at Chenette, how you helped to create such a special, empowering community, and how this movie is now helping to foster a whole nother movement. You know, it's like, could you ever have imagined? So thank you so much for being here tonight. And I just want to let everyone in the audience know that in our follow-up email, we're going to be sharing some resources with you as well. If you would like to learn more about Crip Camp, if you'd like to learn more about the disability rights movement, we'll be sharing books by Judy and Denise Scherer Jacobson, and about the Crip Camp virtual experiences that are happening every weekend that are open to everyone.
Yeah, so there's a big thing this Sunday for the literal 30th anniversary of the ADA. So I think it's going to be a special 2-hour virtual Crip Camp. So that would be fun to check out. Lionel, go ahead.
Megan, I would like to thank you.
Oh, thanks.
For giving us an opportunity to for us to continue to be able to tell this wonderful story. Because every time we talk about it, we relive it. And there has not been a part of my life that I have not felt so whole and so wonderful as the time that I was at Camp Chenette, living in BB1 with Clifford Seagull.
Thank you.
Gary Walker. Calvin Brothers.
And Jim Lebrecht.
Oh, Jim Lebrecht is in that boat.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And we'll be in touch soon through email.
Hey, we have a Facebook page.
Say that again, Lionel.
There's a Facebook page, the Camp Chenette Facebook in Hunter. There are two Facebooks under the name Camp Chenette. It's set up by Steve Heumann, who took all of the pictures, and there are over 100 pictures. And you can enjoy seeing some of us back then. And my afro was that big.
If you want to send me that, I would be happy to share that in our email.
Okay, I will.
All right. Wonderful.
So, Megan, we're off now, right?
I think we should be ending now. So, okay. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Good night.
Bye-bye.